Hey folks, PikPikPanda and BuzzBomber64 here for a new episode of Co-op Reviews. The goal of our reviews is to narrow down aspects of a game we've played so we can share our opinions to determine if it's something you should pick up for you and your friends, if it's something you should avoid, or perhaps if you should go it alone. In today's episode,
Resident Evil 6.
The sixth flagship title in the ongoing Resident Evil series of games, RE6 is a story-driven game with a cooperative-focused direction. Unlike past titles, Resident Evil 6 has a character-based split story in which the overall narrative is slowly exposed as you progress from chapter to chapter, finishing a large story from the eyes of pairings such as Leon and Helena, Chris and Pierce, Jake and Sherry, and finally a solo play story of Ada Wong. Like past stories, the overarching narrative is that the bad guys are doing terrible things with chemicals, and we, as the good guys, need to not only clean up the mess, but also survive.
Resident Evil 6 offers both an online solo screen experience where you and your friend, or you and a random online player, can play on separate machines with a full screen view. Or you can play locally on the same machine via split screen. While we always do like it when everyone can see their own full view of the action, the local split screen did not detract from the game in any significant way.
Single-player survival horror has always been the driving focus of the Resident Evil franchise. While the newest iteration, Resident Evil 7, has returned to that concept with an FPS flair, 6 was capitalizing on a period where online co-op was the hip, cool thing. Starting with the optional co-op of Resident Evil 5, 6 brought back more of that to give more people Resident Evil but with friends. 6, of course, can be played entirely single-player with the second character being controlled by AI, but there's clearly benefits to having a second player take the reins. Be it alone or with a partner, the entire story of Resident Evil 6 can be experienced. Now, a special note in that regard, originally the Ada Wong story was oddly single-player, which made sense from a narrative standpoint, but likely due to backlash they patched a voiceless, personality-free second character simply called Agent, whom is only in the story if Ada's story is selected for co-op, otherwise she's alone as she was originally intended to be. The character Agent, while allowing Ada's story to be played cooperatively, is a shell of the other companions. Almost humorously existent as an imaginary friend, Agent cannot interact with anything on his own.
There isn't a ton of replayability in Resident Evil 6. Once you've seen the story, you've essentially consumed all the content the game has to offer. While higher difficulty modes and some unlocks can make a second playthrough a bit more interesting, it's a game that will get repetitive after a while due to its focus on set pieces. With a friend, however, we believe additional playthroughs with new players can be fun. There's no real progression that would give one player an advantage over the other, and experiencing the story with new friends can liven up a game you may have thought stale. For the most part, though, Resident Evil 6 is a one-and-done experience.
Taking a gander at Steam, Resident Evil 6 has a listed retail price of $39.99 or $49.99 for a complete edition, but with the game's age, it's frequently available in a variety of sales or humble bundles. For example, you can snag it in the Steam Summer Sale at the time of this recording for $10. With that in mind, we would probably say pass on it if it's listing at full retail cost, but with its frequent sale availability, it's certainly worth a snag if at least to experiment with.
Resident Evil 6 is a bit of an older game now, having been released back in 2013. And while it looked fairly good at the time, a few things haven't aged as well. In terms of sheer polygon count, the game looks as good or better than its predecessor, Resident Evil 5. We played the game on PC using both a high-end GTX 1080 and a last-generation GTX 970, and the game ran without any frame loss, hiccups, or significant slowdown, regardless of what was on screen. Tested on the PS3, the game also ran well on console. However, it's not without some problems. In many parts of the game, the texturing seems very lackluster. Buildings and objects in the world seem flat and boring. The objects that are right in your face do look better, though we felt that the game could have taken some time to breathe some more life into its background elements, especially comparing it to the now somewhat ancient Resident Evil 4, which is well remembered for its very visceral feeling world. Since the game is playable on any modern console, Xbox, PS4, and PC, it supports the native gamepads of those platforms as well as keyboard and mouse on the PC. While both worked well for gameplay, the keyboard made inventory management and QuickTime button presses difficult to manage. The game is best enjoyed with a gamepad, but if all you have is a keyboard and mouse, the game is certainly serviceable and we wouldn't say it avoided on that alone. Connecting with the game is fairly straightforward online, although it's not super clear as to when the game will start versus when you will be able to invite your friends. You have to be sure to follow the on-screen prompts and go through the game setup process. You will eventually come to a lobby where you can invite a friend or join up with a random player. The game simply uses your Steam, Xbox, or PSN account for invites and has no internal account system or listing system.
The sound design in the game is on par with the series thus far. Gunshots, growls, and a variety of other sound effects all hit home, and the background music can go from dramatic action flair to spooky ambience depending on the level and chapter, and it all fits perfectly fine. There's many times in the game where the combat is the active task, and the mixture direction of all the sounds, music, and ambience all combine to be exciting, impactful, and fun. The structure of the gameplay, however, is somewhat of a concern. Resident Evil 6 uses a checkpoint system and an autosave feature, though the game is not always clear as to when these occur. Throughout our playthrough, we quit the game at seemingly obvious checkpoints, only to be sent back 10 or 15 minutes in some cases upon loading the game up again. Lastly, the grotesquely mutated elephant in the room, so to speak, is the controversy over the game being a good Resident Evil game. Unfortunately, the majority of the game seems to toss most of its survival horror roots out the window for a more action-oriented game with large over-the-top set pieces. This is sometimes at odds with some of the game's holdover mechanics from previous installments, such as puzzle key segments or herb mixing, which seem to be only there for the sake of callback. With each passing game, from the unanimously praised 4 to the meme-spewing 5 and now to 6, the Resident Evil series seems to want to biologically conjure up bigger and bigger sharks to jump. That being said, it's a really fun game for what it is. If you're a die-hard fan of the series, you may be disappointed in the story, but Resident Evil 6 is a solid third-person action game.
Resident Evil 6 is not an overly difficult game when played on normal, and does offer higher difficulties for challenging more experienced players. With the co-op aspect, we didn't really run into any challenges that we got hung up on for more than a few moments. That being said, we believe almost anyone will find some fun in Resident Evil 6. Although the subject matter may be unsuitable for younger gamers, so as always we recommend following the game's ESRB rating to determine if the game is appropriate for you.
Here at Co-opt In, we don't like to stamp things with stars or out of 10s. Instead, we rate games based on our focus, so we'll tell you if we're going to co-opt in, co-opt out, or simply tell you to go it alone. While Resident Evil 6 didn't win any awards with fans or other critics, we still found it to be a perfectly serviceable title. It's always interesting to see what zany creations Umbrella cooks up next, and this doesn't disappoint in the zaniness. Co-op is enjoyable, and there's a lengthy game to be had for the price you can find it at, but that's pretty much what we're going to focus on specifically. At full price, Resident Evil 6 is a pass, but the game is on sale so often, it's rare to not find it cheap. With that in mind, as long as it's on sale, Resident Evil 6 is a zany co-opt in.
Well, that's all for this review, guys. We hope you enjoyed our take on Resident Evil 6, or at least found it informative. We had a pretty good time playing this game, despite some of its flaws. So if you'd like to see how we came up with our own opinions, we welcome you to take a peek at the playthrough we've done. Thanks so much for watching Co-opt In, guys. We appreciate any comments you leave us, as well as those subscription, as they do mean a lot. Don't forget to like or dislike the video, as it does help us to improve our content. Thanks again, everyone, and we'll see you on the next Co-opt In.